I had gone to the airport to say goodbye to my daughter Ashley, who was traveling to Miami for work. I was standing in line right next to her when she approached me with that look I knew all too well. She wanted something from me. "Mom, I need your credit card. It is just for some shopping during my trip." When I politely refused explaining that I did not feel comfortable lending out my card, her face changed completely. "You are a stingy old hag," she screamed at me, throwing the hot coffee she was holding right in front of all the passengers in line. The coffee soaked my cream-colored blouse, and I stood there humiliated while people around us whispered and pointed. "My name is Dorothy Henderson. I am 72 years old. I am a retired nurse, and in that moment I realized that my own daughter saw me only as a source of money, not as her mother. What Ashley did not know was that I had worked 42 years as a nurse to save every single dollar I had in my savings. She grew up seeing only the final result, never the double shifts on weekends, never the overtime during holidays, never the mended shoes I wore to save money for her future. There at the airport, wet and ashamed, I remembered when she was little and used to say I was the best mom in the world. Now at 45 years old, married to Michael Stevens for 20 years, and mother to Robert, 17, and Chloe, 15, she only looked for me when she needed something financial. The airport security guard approached with paper towels, and an unknown older lady offered me tissues with a look of understanding that broke my heart even more. Ashley stood there waiting for me to change my mind about the card, as always happened when she insisted. But when they announced the boarding for her flight to Miami, something unexpected happened. The airline employee asked for her documents, and that was when Ashley discovered she had forgotten her driver's license at home in the rush to get to the airport. Without identification, she could not board the flight. The irony of the situation hit me like a bolt of lightning. She who had humiliated me for money was now prevented from traveling due to her own negligence. While she argued desperately with the airline employees, I silently walked away toward the airport exit. But what she did not know was that this would be the last time I would allow myself to be treated like a walking ATM. I grew up in a humble family in Detroit, Michigan. My father, Joseph Henderson, worked in a textile factory, and my mother, Carolyn Miller, took in sewing jobs at home to help with family expenses. We were 5 siblings, and I was the oldest, which meant that from a very young age I learned to take care of the younger ones and help with housework. My parents always instilled in us the value of hard work and the importance of family. "Family is the most sacred thing we have, darling," my mother used to tell me while she sewed until the early hours of the morning. Everything we do is for them. When I finished high school, my parents made a huge financial effort so I could study nursing. It was a dream I had since I was a little girl, inspired by Sister Mary, a nun who cared for the sick in our neighborhood. My mother sold her gold jewelry, the only valuables she had to pay for my tuition. "Education is the most valuable inheritance we can give you," she told me the day she handed me the money. I never forgot that sacrifice. I studied with dedication, working part-time cleaning offices to help with my personal expenses. I met Frank Henderson, Ashley's father, when he was 25 and working as a supervisor at a construction company. I was 23 and had just gotten my first job as a nurse at Detroit General Hospital. We met at a Christmas party at a mutual friend's house. Frank was a hard-working, serious man with solid family values. His parents, Raymond and Rose Henderson, owned a small grocery store downtown. He came from a family of honest merchants who valued effort and honesty above all else. Our courtship lasted 2 years. Frank respected me deeply and admired my dedication to work. "I like that you are an independent woman, Dorothy," he used to tell me. "I want us to remain a team when we get married." We got married at St. Mary's Church in a simple ceremony full of love. Our parents struggled to give us a dignified wedding, and I remember how proud I felt walking arm in arm with my father toward the altar, knowing I had found a man who valued me for who I really was. The first years of marriage were beautiful. Frank and I worked hard to buy our first house, a small home in a modest but safe neighborhood. I continued working as a nurse, and he had gotten a promotion as a site foreman. In the afternoons after work, we would sit on the small patio of our house planning our future. We talked about the children we would have, about the values we would instill in them, about the importance of giving them a better education than what we had received. When I got pregnant with Ashley, it was the happiest news of our lives. Frank went out of his way to take care of me, bringing me special vitamins, buying books on babies, accompanying me to all medical appointments. "She is going to be the most loved girl in the world," he said, caressing my belly. And during the first years of Ashley's life, that is exactly how it was. She was our little princess, the center of our universe. Frank worked extra shifts so I could take a longer leave and dedicate myself completely to caring for our daughter. Ashley was a happy, curious baby full of life. She crawled all over the house, exploring every corner with that determination that would characterize her personality in the future. Frank would arrive from work, and the first thing he did was pick her up, make her laugh, and play with her until bath time. On weekends, we took her to the park to visit the grandparents to Sunday Mass. We were a complete happy family, united by the genuine love we felt for one another. When Ashley turned 3, we decided it was time for me to return to work. Frank had secured an important contract that ensured stable income for several years, but we wanted to save to buy a bigger house and for our daughters' future education. I found work on the night shift at a private clinic, which allowed me to care for Ashley during the day while Frank worked, and he took charge of her at night while I was at the clinic. It was a period of much sacrifice, but also of much hope. Frank and I saw each other barely a few hours a day, but everything had a clear purpose: to give Ashley the best possible opportunities. On weekends, we made up for the lost time during the week. We went to the municipal pool, prepared special meals, invited my siblings and their families so Ashley could spend time with her cousins. They were moments of pure happiness, where it was confirmed that all our sacrifices were worth it. When Ashley entered elementary school, she immediately stood out as an intelligent and charismatic girl. Her teachers always had positive comments about her academic performance and her natural leadership among her classmates. Frank and I felt proud watching our daughter flourish, but we also noticed she began to develop a more demanding personality. She wanted the most expensive school supplies, the brand name shoes that some of her classmates from wealthier families wore. "It is normal," Dorothy Frank reassured me. "She is a smart girl who notices social differences. We just have to teach her the value of things and that not everything can be had immediately." So we established a system of goals and rewards. If Ashley maintained good grades and helped with housework, she could save to buy herself something special she wanted. It was a way to teach her discipline and the value of effort. During the elementary and middle school years, this system worked relatively well. Ashley was an exemplary student. She participated in school plays, had a wide social circle, and maintained a close relationship with us. On Sundays after church, we went to have breakfast at a family restaurant, and those moments became a sacred tradition for our family. Ashley told us about her friends, her teachers, her plans for the future. Frank and I exchanged looks of complicity, satisfied to have raised such a wonderful daughter. But something began to change during high school. Ashley started hanging out with classmates from very wealthy families, and her expectations about the lifestyle she should have began to grow exponentially. She wanted exclusive designer clothes, extravagant parties for her birthday, expensive spring break trips. Frank and I made great efforts to please her in what we could, working overtime, postponing our own tastes and needs. "We just do not want her to feel less than her friends," I would tell Frank when he expressed concern about the excessive expenses we were making to satisfy Ashley's desires. "It is a phase. She will get over it when she matures." But deep down, we both knew that something was changing in the family dynamic. Ashley began to see our efforts as something we owed her, not as sacrifices we made out of love. The day she graduated from high school, Frank and I were so proud that we hired a live band to surprise her at the ceremony. Ashley looked beautiful in her cap and gown, but when the band began to play a traditional song, I saw in her eyes not the joy I expected, but shame. Her wealthy friends had more sophisticated celebrations, and our display of traditional affection seemed outdated and embarrassing to her. That night, instead of thanking us, She asked us to consult with her in the future before planning shows like that. Frank and I were left speechless. We had spent the equivalent of 2 weeks of our combined salaries to make her happy, and she was scolding us for the way we had chosen to express our pride. That was the first time I felt a real crack in the relationship with my daughter. She was not just a rebellious teenager. She was a young woman who was beginning to be ashamed of her own parents and their values. During her college years, Ashley studied business administration at a prestigious private university. Frank and I made enormous sacrifices to pay her tuition. I took additional shifts on weekends. Frank accepted construction jobs on Sundays. We sold our car and used public transportation so she could have a top-quality education. Everything is for your future, honey. I told her when she complained that we could not give her all the luxuries her college classmates wanted. It was in college where she met Michael Stevens, a young man from an upper-middle-class family whose father owned a pharmacy chain in the city. Michael was an educated, handsome boy with good professional prospects. Frank and I welcomed him with affection into our home, but we soon realized he came from a world very different from ours. His parents, Arthur Stevens and Patricia, were cultured people, but with a condescending attitude toward families like ours. When Ashley officially introduced us to Michael, we organized a special dinner at our house. My sister Ellen helped me prepare my famous pot roast homemade mashed potatoes and all the traditional dishes I knew were delicious. We decorated the house with fresh flowers and set out our best dishes. Frank put on his best shirt and tie. We wanted to make a good impression on the family of the man who could become our son-in-law. The dinner was uncomfortable from the start. Michael's parents arrived dressed as if they were going to a black tie gala, while we, despite our efforts, clearly looked more humble. Arthur Stevens made subtle but hurtful comments about our furniture, our decoration, even about the homemade food I had prepared with so much love. How authentic, he said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Patricia barely tasted the food and spent the entire evening asking about our professional prospects as if she were evaluating whether we were worthy of being part of their social circle. Ashley, instead of defending her family, seemed nervous and ashamed. She apologized constantly for things that did not require apology. The size of our house, her father's type of work, my night shifts at the clinic. It was as if she were seeing her own parents through the classist eyes of Michael's family. And she did not like what she saw. That night after they left, Frank and I hugged each other in our small living room, feeling that we had lost something precious that we could never recover. Ashley and Michael's wedding was another event that marked the growing distance between us. They wanted an elegant ceremony in an exclusive hall downtown. Frank and I emptied our savings accounts, took out a loan, and I even sold some of my jewelry to contribute to the expenses. But during all the planning, I felt that my opinion mattered less and less. The decisions were made by Ashley Michael and his family. I was just the mother of the bride who had to pay her share and keep quiet. The day of the wedding, I felt like a stranger at my own daughter's celebration. The venue was beautiful, the food exquisite, the music elegant. But when the time for speeches came, Ashley thanked Michael's parents effusively for their generosity and support, mentioning Frank and me only in passing as if we were obligation guests. During the dance, I watched how she moved naturally among Michael's sophisticated friends, laughing and talking about topics Frank and I could not follow. That night, as Frank and I returned home in a taxi, because we had sold our car to pay for the wedding, he took my hand and said, "I think we lost our daughter, Dorothy. We are no longer the most important people in her life." He was right, but I still had the hope that when grandchildren arrived, things would change. I thought motherhood would make her value again the unconditional love Frank and I had always given her. When Ashley announced she was expecting Robert, Frank, and I were thrilled to become grandparents. We moved to a house closer to theirs to be able to help with the baby when necessary. I reduced my work hours to be available, and Frank began to build a handcrafted wooden crib for his first grandson. We were willing to be the most dedicated and loving grandparents any child could have. But soon we discovered that our role as grandparents would also be limited by the unwritten rules of Ashley's new social life. We could watch Robert when they needed to go out, but we could not spoil him with candy or toys without consulting first. We could visit them, but only by appointment and for limited periods. We could give gifts, but they had to be appropriate according to the educational standards Michael and Ashley had established. Robert was a beautiful, intelligent, and affectionate boy. When he was with us, he seemed relaxed and happy. He liked me telling him traditional stories, singing him the lullabies I had sung to his mother, watching Frank teach him to make paper airplanes. But these family traditions seemed to bother Ashley, who preferred her son to be educated with more modern and scientific methods. When Chloe was born 2 years later, the pattern repeated itself. We were useful as occasional babysitters and gift providers, but our opinions on raising the grandchildren were not welcome. Ashley had read books on motherhood, attended conferences on child development, hired a professional nanny. Frank and I, who had successfully raised a daughter to become a successful professional, apparently had nothing valuable to contribute to our grandchildren's education. Years passed, and the emotional distance continued to grow. Ashley and Michael prospered professionally. He expanded the family pharmacy business. She got an executive position at a multinational company. They moved to a large house in an exclusive area. They bought luxury cars, traveled frequently for work and pleasure. We remained in our modest house, living on our retirement pensions and feeling increasingly disconnected from our daughter's prosperous life. Visits became spaced out and formal. Ashley appeared at our house only when she needed us to watch the kids in an emergency or when she wanted us to contribute financially for some large expense for Robert and Chloe. Frank developed diabetes and heart problems, but Ashley was too busy with her career to accompany him to medical appointments. I continued working part-time as a private nurse to help with Frank's medical expenses and to have a small emergency fund. Frank passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack one Sunday morning. Ashley arrived at the hospital an hour after he had died because she was at a work conference and had not checked her phone. During the funeral, she acted like the perfect grieving daughter in front of family and friends, but I knew she had stopped having a real relationship with her father years ago. Her tears were genuine, but they were tears for the father she remembered from her childhood, not for the man she had been ignoring for the last decade of her life. After Frank's death, I was left alone in our house. Ashley suggested I consider moving to a smaller apartment, something more appropriate for an older person, but I refused. That house held all my happy memories with Frank, all the family traditions we had built together. It was the only thing I had left of the life we had shared, and I was not willing to give it up for the convenience of others. During these 5 years of widowhood, I have maintained a cordial but superficial relationship with Ashley and her family. We celebrate Christmas together, important birthdays, special occasions. Robert and Chloe genuinely love me, but they are growing up with the values of privilege and entitlement their parents have adopted. Robert at 17 is already talking about studying abroad. Chloe at 15 has the same materialistic attitudes her mother had developed in high school. And so we arrived at today at this moment in the airport where everything changed forever. Ashley had secured an important work contract that required several trips to Miami over the coming months. She had come to my house last week to tell me about this opportunity, and I had been genuinely happy for her professional success. That is great, honey. You've always been very hardworking, and you deserve this recognition. But when she asked to borrow my credit card for minor expenses during her trip, something inside me resisted. It was not the money that bothered me. My nursing pension and small savings allowed me to live comfortably. It was the fact that after so many years of emotional distance, she only sought me out when she needed something material. It was the fact that she saw me as a financial convenience, not as her mother. "Why don't you use your own credit card, Ashley?" I asked her. "You have a better financial situation than I do." Her answer was revealing. "Because mine is maxed out from the holiday shopping. Besides, you never spend on anything, so your card must have plenty of available credit. In other words, because I lived modestly, it was logical that I put my financial stability at risk to subsidize her extravagant lifestyle. When I politely refused explaining that I did not feel comfortable mixing our personal finances, her reaction was so disproportionate that I froze. The woman who screamed at me at the airport was not my daughter. She was a stranger who had learned to see her mother as an obstacle to getting what she wanted. The hot coffee she threw at me did not just stain my blouse. It symbolized the end of any illusion I might have had about the nature of our relationship. As I walk now toward the airport exit with damp clothes and a broken heart, I know that something fundamental has changed forever. For the first time in 72 years, I am not going to apologize, justify, or rationalize the hurtful behavior of someone who is supposed to love me. For the first time in my life, I am going to prioritize my dignity over the desire to maintain family peace. And although I still do not know exactly what I will do from now on, I know that the Dorothy Henderson leaving this airport is different from the one who entered. She is a woman who has finally learned that self-love is not selfishness, it is survival. I arrived home still with the cream blouse stained with coffee and my heart heavy as a stone. The landline was already ringing insistently. It was Ashley, furious, blaming me for the embarrassment at the airport. If you had lent me the credit card, I would have had enough time to pick up my ID at home. She screamed at me from the other end of the line with a rage that froze my blood. I hung up the phone and sat in the floral rocking chair where my late husband Frank used to read the newspaper every morning. It was there that the memories came like a painful storm. The cloth diapers I washed by hand to save money, the sleepless nights when she was sick with a fever, the expensive birthday gifts I bought even when money was tight at the end of the month. I had sacrificed for whole decades, and now she treated me like a stingy stranger. In the following days, Ashley did not speak to me directly, but sent her husband Michael to try to convince me to change my mind about the loan. Mrs. Henderson, you know how Ashley is when she gets frustrated. She did not mean that at the airport, but I knew she had said exactly what she had thought about me for a long time. During that entire lonely week, I stayed reflecting on my current life. I had my own house that Frank and I bought 48 years ago, a nursing pension that gave me dignity and some savings I kept religiously in an old bank account. My 2 grandchildren, Robert and Chloe, came to visit me only when Ashley needed a free babysitter to go out with her husband. It was a convenience for emergencies, not a beloved and respected grandmother. The loneliness I felt was not from being physically alone in the house, but from realizing that my own family had turned into a group of interested strangers. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon that I decided to call my old work colleague from the hospital, Ellen, who had moved to a coastal city after retiring 2 years ago. Dorothy, you need to live for yourself. Sell that big house and come live near the sea with me. Life is too short to keep being the doormat for ungrateful children. Her words resonated in my mind for days and nights on end. I began to imagine what it would be like to wake up every morning listening to the sound of ocean waves instead of the deafening noise of city traffic, having neighbors who greeted me with genuine affection instead of family who only appeared when they needed a financial favor. And in that silent moment, looking at the wedding photo on the living room wall, something inside me finally broke. Not from deep sadness, but from an unexpected liberation I had not felt for decades. During those days of solitary reflection, I began to remember who I had been before becoming just Ashley's mom. Dorothy Henderson had been an ambitious young nurse who dreamed of specializing in pediatrics. I had plans to study for a master's degree, to travel, knowing different hospitals, maybe write articles on nursing care for specialized magazines. But when Ashley arrived, I put all those dreams in a drawer to dedicate myself completely to being the perfect mother I believed she deserved. I remembered the nights when Frank slept and I stayed awake nursing Ashley, whispering stories to her about the places we would visit together when she was older. I told her about the family traditions. I would teach her the secret recipes from my mother. I would share with her how the 2 of us would be best friends when she grew up. In those intimate moments, I imagined we would have a relationship like the one I had had with my mother, Carolyn, close, warm, full of mutual trust. My mother had died when Ashley was 15, a victim of cancer that consumed her quickly. During her last months, Ashley visited her religiously in the hospital, bringing her fresh flowers and reading her passages from the Bible. My mother adored her granddaughter and always told me, "How lucky you are, Dorothy. Ashley is going to be your best company when you are older. She's a girl with a good heart." If my mother could see how Ashley behaves with me now, she would feel devastated by the transformation. I also remembered the early years after Frank and I got married when we lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment near downtown Detroit. We were happy with so little. Our furniture was secondhand. Our vacations consisted of Sunday walks to the park, and our romantic dinners were tacos at the local market. Frank worked long hours in construction. He returned home with cracked hands and a sore back, but he always had a smile for me and energy to plan our future together. When we have children, Dorothy, he would tell me while we counted our coins for the weekly expense, we are going to give them everything we did not have. But more importantly, we are going to teach them to value what they have and to respect those who give them love. Frank had a simple but profound philosophy about family. Love is demonstrated with actions, not with pretty words, and children who grow up knowing they are loved unconsciously become adults who know how to love others in the same way. That philosophy worked during the first years of Ashley's life. She was a grateful, affectionate girl who valued the simple gifts we could give her. Her favorite dolls were not the most expensive ones, but the ones I sewed by hand with scraps of colorful fabric. Her favorite stories did not come from expensive books, but from the made-up stories Frank and I told her before sleeping. Her happiest moments were not in expensive places, but in the kitchen of our house, helping me prepare pancakes for Sunday breakfast. At what exact moment did all that begin to change? I think it was gradual, so subtle that Frank and I did not realize it until it was too late. Maybe it started when Ashley started elementary school where there were children of different socioeconomic levels. Maybe it was when she started comparing her clothes, her supplies, her lunch with those of classmates who came from wealthier families. Or maybe it was when we, in our eagerness to give her the best, began to make disproportionate financial sacrifices to satisfy desires that before would have been considered whims. I vividly remember the day of her 10th birthday. Ashley had seen a pink bicycle with a basket and bell at the department store and had put on that expression of intense desire that children put on when they want something desperately. The bicycle cost the equivalent of 3 weeks of Frank's salary, but we decided to buy it because we wanted to see her face of happiness. Frank worked double shifts for a month to pay for that bicycle without affecting our basic expenses. On the day of her birthday, when she saw the bicycle on the patio, decorated with balloons and a big pink bow, Ashley screamed with joy and hugged us with an emotion so pure that Frank and I looked at each other, knowing we had done the right thing. But that happiness lasted only until her friend Claudia arrived at the party, riding an even more expensive bicycle with gear shifts and accessories that ours did not have. I saw how Ashley's face changed from pure joy to medium satisfaction in a matter of minutes. That was the first time I realized we had created a problem. No matter how hard we tried, there would always be something better, more expensive, more exclusive, that other families could give their children and that we could not afford. But instead of using that situation to teach Ashley about gratitude and realistic limits, Frank and I interpreted her disappointment as our failure. We decided to work even harder to be able to give her better things in the future. The middle school years were when this dynamic became truly problematic. Ashley had developed expensive tastes and an aspirational social circle. Her friends were girls whose parents were doctors, lawyers, owners of prosperous businesses. Frank and I, a nurse, and a construction supervisor, started feeling inadequate at school meetings. The other mothers talked about family trips to Europe, about piano and French classes, for their daughters, about preparation to study at prestigious private universities. Ashley began to ask us for things that were clearly out of our financial reach. Designer clothes to look like her friends, private English tutors not to be left behind, elaborate parties to compete with the celebrations other families organized. Frank and I went into serious debt to please her, justifying every excessive expense with the phrase, "It is for her future. Everything we do for her education and development will be worth it." But I began to notice that the more we gave her, the less grateful she showed herself. Expensive gifts became normal expectations. The financial sacrifices we made became invisible to her. And the most painful thing, Frank and I began to be a source of shame when her social standards rose faster than our ability to keep up with them. I remember the day of her middle school graduation. Frank had bought a new suit with borrowed money to look presentable at the ceremony. I had dressed up in my best dress and my only elegant shoes. We were proud and excited to see our daughter receive her certificate. But when we arrived at the school auditorium, I saw how Ashley avoided introducing us to the parents of her most popular friends. She managed to keep us in a section of the auditorium while she socialized with families she considered more appropriate for her social image. That night, Frank confessed to me that he had felt humiliated. "I worked all week overtime to buy this suit. Dorothy and my own daughter acts as if we were an embarrassment." I tried to console him, explaining that it was a normal stage of adolescence, that Ashley loved us, but was confused by social pressure. But deep down, I had also felt the subtle rejection of our daughter, and it hurt me more than I wanted to admit. High school brought new challenges. Ashley wanted to study at the most exclusive private school in the city, where the children of the wealthiest families studied. The monthly tuition was equivalent to Frank's entire salary. When I explained that it was financially impossible for us, Ashley had the first true emotional breakdown I remember seeing in her. She cried, screamed, accused me of ruining her future by being conformists and of not loving enough to make the necessary effort. Frank and I spent sleepless nights analyzing our finances, looking for ways to make the impossible possible. Finally, we decided to mortgage our house to pay for the 3 years of high school at that exclusive school. It was a risky financial decision that could have left us homeless if something went wrong with our jobs. But we justified it, telling ourselves it was an investment in Ashley's future. During those 3 years of high school, Frank worked double shifts regularly, and I accepted additional jobs as a private nurse on weekends. Our social life disappeared completely because all our free time was dedicated to generating the extra money needed to keep Ashley in that school. We ate basically dressed in secondhand clothes and postponed any personal expense to be able to finance not only the tuition, but also the social expenses Ashley needed to fit in with her wealthy classmates. And during those 3 years, instead of thanking our sacrifices, Ashley drifted emotionally further from us. The more we strove to give her access to a superior, socio-economic world, the more shame she seemed to feel about her humble origins. She stopped bringing friends home because our modest dwelling was not up to the standards she was getting used to. She stopped participating in Sunday family meals because she preferred to socialize with her new friends. She stopped telling us about her daily life because apparently we no longer had enough education or sophistication to understand her new world. The day of her high school graduation, Frank and I were physically and emotionally exhausted, but proud to have managed to give her the education she wanted. Ashley had been accepted into the most prestigious private university in the state to study business administration. But when the time came for acknowledgments in her speech as one of the best students of her generation, she mentioned her teachers, her classmates, the educational institution, but she did not mention even once the sacrifices Frank and I had made to make that moment possible. That night, while I was cleaning the house after the small celebration we had organized for her, I found a letter she had left forgotten on her dresser. It was from one of her friends congratulating her on her graduation, but also commenting, "It is great that you are finally going to university and will be able to make your own life far from, the environment of your house." Frank read the letter with me, and we both understood that for Ashley's friends, and possibly for herself, our family was something to escape from, not something to value. The college years were even more difficult financially. The business administration degree at that private university was extremely expensive. And Ashley also needed money for appropriate clothes, specialized materials, social activities that were an integral part of the university experience in that exclusive environment. Frank developed health problems from overwork, hypertension, back problems, chronic fatigue, but he kept accepting extra jobs because there were 2 years left for Ashley to graduate. It was during the 3rd year of college that Ashley met Michael. At first, Frank and I were happy she had a serious boyfriend. Michael seemed like a responsible, educated young man with good professional prospects. His family had a successful business, and he was studying to eventually take over. When Ashley introduced him to us officially, we did our best to make a good impression. But from the first family dinner with Michael, I realized that Ashley's circle of social influence had risen to a level completely out of our reach. Michael was polite and courteous with us, but there was a condescending distance in his way of treating us. He asked questions about our jobs and our opinions, but the tone suggested he was evaluating if we were appropriate to be part of his world, not genuinely trying to know us as people. Ashley, for her part, was clearly nervous during those first interactions between Michael and us. She apologized in advance for things that did not require apology: the size of our house, the simplicity of our furniture, the homemade food prepared with love. It was as if she were constantly translating between two incompatible worlds, the humble and authentic world where she had grown up and the aspirational and materialistic world to which she now belonged. Ashley's transformation accelerated during the last year of college. Michael had introduced her to his parents, Arthur and Patricia, who were sophisticated people with important social and economic connections in the city. When I finally met the future in-laws, I understood why Ashley had developed so much anxiety about our socio-economic differences. Arthur and Patricia were cultured and successful people, but they were also classist in a way they made seem natural and polite. During the formal dinner, they organized to meet us. They made subtle but hurtful comments about our jobs, our political opinions, our tastes in music and art. They were not openly rude, but they had a refined ability to make us feel inadequate and ignorant without saying anything directly offensive. Frank, who had always been a man proud of his achievements and his honesty, left that dinner feeling small and humiliated. "We are not good enough for them, Dorothy," he told me in the car back home, and it seems to me that Ashley is starting to think the same. I tried to console him, but I knew he was right. Our daughter had been seduced by a world where a person's value was measured by their bank account and social connections, not by their character or their capacity to love. The day Ashley graduated from college, Frank and I were physically and emotionally exhausted but satisfied to have kept our promise to give her the best education possible. We had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on her university career. We had worked to the limit of our physical capacities. We had sacrificed our own comfort and financial security. But when the time for the graduation ceremony came, we realized we had lost our daughter in the process of giving her everything we thought she wanted. Ashley graduated with honors, immediately got a well-paid job at a multinational company, and announced her engagement to Michael only 6 months later. Her professional and personal life was perfectly on track according to all external standards of success, but the relationship between her and us had been reduced to formal and superficial interactions. We were no longer her confidants, her advisors, her friends. We were the parents she had to tolerate during her youth, but who no longer fit into the sophisticated life she had built for herself. Now sitting in my rocking chair after the humiliation at the airport, I can clearly see the whole pattern of gradual loss I had preferred to ignore for so many years. Frank died without ever recovering the close relationship he had had with Ashley during her childhood. And I have spent the last 5 years of widowhood trying to maintain a connection that in reality no longer exists, except when my daughter needs something financial from me. The coffee Ashley threw at me at the airport was not a moment of temporary anger. It was the honest revelation of what she really thinks about me. I am a stingy old woman who has resources she deserves access to when she needs them, but who does not deserve her respect or consideration as a person. And for the first time in my life, I am no longer going to pretend that attitude is acceptable just because it comes from my daughter. The following Monday, I called a real estate agent without telling anyone in the family. I scheduled an appraisal of the house for Wednesday morning when I knew Ashley would be at work and could not appear by surprise. 48 years living at the same address, raising an only child, caring for a sick husband, being the perfect mother and dedicated wife without questioning. Now was finally the time to be Dorothy Henderson, the independent woman I had completely forgotten existed. The agent, Mr. Rodriguez, a well-dressed 50-year-old man, was impressed with the impeccable state of preservation of the house. Mrs. Henderson, with this privileged location and top-quality finishes, we will get an excellent sale value. The real estate market is very hot in this area. I signed the exclusive sales contract that same day, specifying in writing that I wanted a quick and totally discreet negotiation. I spent the following days silently organizing all my personal things. I carefully separated important documents into a folder, the gold jewelry Frank had given me during the marriage, the old family photos, only those that brought me good memories of the past, the rest of the belongings, old furniture, used appliances, memories that no longer made sense to carry to a new life. Everything would stay for the family to discover after my departure. I called Ellen in the coastal city and told her in detail my moving plan. "Are you completely sure about this, Dorothy? It is a very radical decision. I have never been so sure of anything in my entire life." I answered without hesitating a single second. I booked a one-way bus ticket to the coastal city where she had lived for 2 years and rented a small furnished apartment near the main beach. I transferred all my savings from the old bank account to a new account at a different branch, canceled my old credit card, which Ashley knew the number of, and arranged for a new postal address in the coastal city. The buyer of the house appeared on Friday afternoon, a young newlywed couple, looking for their first home. They immediately fell in love with the blooming garden I had tended with so much affection for decades, with the spacious kitchen where I prepared thousands of meals for my ungrateful family. I accepted the first offer at that very moment, even if it was a few thousand below the suggested market value. I already had enough money to live with dignity. What I desperately wanted was total freedom. We scheduled the signing of the final deed for the next Tuesday morning. That weekend, I kept total silence about my plans, pretending normality when Michael called me, asking if I had changed my mind about lending him the money for Ashley's next trip attempt. During those days of secret preparation, I realized how much my perspective had changed on what really constituted family betrayal. For years, I had tolerated Ashley's gradual emotional distancing, telling myself it was natural for adult children to develop their own independent lives. I had excused her lack of gratitude for our financial sacrifices, thinking maybe Frank and I had been too generous without teaching her the true value of money. I had rationalized her shame of our humble origins as a temporary phase of social adjustment she would eventually overcome with maturity. But the airport incident had removed all masks and justifications. Ashley had not screamed at me and thrown hot coffee in a moment of temporary frustration. She had done it because she genuinely believed I was a selfish and inadequate person who was hindering her legitimate plans. For her lending, my credit card was not a favor she should thank, but an obligation I had toward her for being her mother. My refusal was not a reasonable limit she should respect, but a display of pettiness that deserved public punishment. That revelation freed me from decades of self-imposed guilt. I no longer had to wonder what I had done wrong as a mother for my daughter to distance herself emotionally from me. I no longer had to torture myself thinking of ways to recover a close relationship she clearly did not wish to have. I no longer had to sacrifice my financial and emotional well-being to maintain the illusion that we were a united and loving family. Ashley had shown me exactly what she thought of me, and finally, I was ready to believe her. On Saturday morning, while I watered the plants in my garden for the last time, I reflected on all the signs I had ignored over the years. I remembered Christmases where Ashley appeared at my house with expensive gifts for me, but spent most of the time talking on the phone with her friends instead of conversing with me. I remembered birthdays where I organized elaborate family dinners, but she looked clearly bored and impatient to end the celebration quickly. I remembered Sunday visits where she brought Robert and Chloe for me to watch, while she and Michael went to the club or social commitments, but never stayed to share a homemade meal with me. In all those moments, I had interpreted her physical presence as evidence that she loved and valued me, when in reality she was only fulfilling minimal social obligations toward her widowed mother. I had confused basic courtesy with genuine affection, practical convenience with real respect, and the most painful thing to acknowledge. I had been so desperate to maintain some kind of connection with her that I had accepted emotional crumbs as if they were banquets of filial love. That understanding did not fill me with bitterness, but with a strange and liberating clarity. For the first time in years, I did not have to pretend I was satisfied with a relationship that left me feeling lonely and undervalued. For the first time since Frank's death, I could make decisions based on my own well-being instead of the fear of losing the little contact I had with my family. For the first time in my adult life, I could prioritize my personal dignity over the desire to be needed by others. On Sunday afternoon, I went to Mass at the parish, where Frank and I had been parishioners for 30 years. Father Michael, who had known our family since Ashley was a child, asked me how I was after the airport incident. Apparently, some mutual acquaintance had witnessed the scene and commented on what had happened. My daughter, the priest, said to me with genuine concern, "Remember that family relationships go through crises, but love always finds a way to heal wounds." Normally, those words would have convinced me to try an immediate reconciliation with Ashley. I would have interpreted the priest's advice as a divine sign that I should forgive and forget, as I had done so many times before. But that afternoon, sitting on the pew where Frank and I had prayed together for decades, I understood that genuine forgiveness does not require tolerating continuous abuse, that a mother's love does not mean accepting chronic lack of respect, that honoring the commandment to honor parents cannot be a one-way street. Father Michael then replied with a serenity that surprised even me. There is a difference between temporary crises and permanent patterns of behavior. Sometimes healing requires distance, not proximity. The priest looked at me with an expression of surprise. Apparently, he did not expect that answer from the Dorothy Henderson he knew always willing to apologize and justify the hurtful actions of others. But I was no longer that same woman. During Mass, while I listened to readings about love and forgiveness, I thought about the difference between forgiving someone for their mistakes and allowing someone to continue hurting you without consequences. Frank had taught me that true love includes healthy limits, that respecting someone means also demanding respect in return. Dorothy, he had told me during one of his periods of illness, when Ashley had canceled several promised visits, "Loving our daughter does not mean accepting anything she does. It means loving her enough not to allow her to become a cruel person." Frank had died before seeing to what extent Ashley had developed that cruelty, but his words took on prophetic meaning that Sunday at church. I had been so focused on loving my daughter unconditionally that I had forgotten to teach her the reciprocity of love. I had been so worried about not being a burden to her that I had allowed her to treat me as if I were exactly that an annoying burden she had to tolerate occasionally. That night, I prepared my last dinner in the kitchen where I'd fed my family for almost 5 decades. I made enchiladas, Frank's favorite meal, using the recipe my mother had taught me when I was young. While I cooked, I remembered all the family celebrations that had taken place in that house: birthdays, Christmases, graduations, the baby shower when Ashley was expecting Robert, the first communion parties of my grandchildren. In all those memories, I appeared as the central figure, organizing, cooking, serving, cleaning up after. Frank had been my loyal partner in creating those special moments for our family, but after his death, I had become solely responsible for maintaining family traditions. And gradually, I had noticed that my role had evolved from beloved hostess to unpaid domestic employee. The last few Christmases had been particularly revealing. Ashley, Michael, and the kids had arrived at my house expecting to find the table set, the food prepared, the gifts wrapped and organized under the tree I had decorated alone. During dinner, they had talked mainly among themselves about their vacation plans, their new acquisitions, their professional projects. I had been included in the conversation only when they needed me to pass more food or when Robert and Chloe required attention from their grandmother. After dinner, while I washed the dishes in the kitchen, I had heard Ashley and Michael in the living room commenting on how boring family Christmases had become and how predictable my traditional menus were. Ashley had suggested that next year maybe they should celebrate at a restaurant so as not to have so much work. The work she referred to, of course, was my work I did with love, and that they had begun to take for granted as an obligation they were entitled to receive. Now, eating my enchiladas in silence in that same kitchen, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. Sadness for all the beautiful moments that had been gradually emptied of genuine emotional meaning. Liberation because I finally understood that preserving my dignity was more important than preserving relationships that made me feel invisible and undervalued. Monday morning, I called Robert and Chloe to say goodbye without explaining exactly where I was going. Robert, who had just turned 18 and was in his last year of high school, listened to me with the typical distraction of busy teenagers. "It is okay, Grandma, have a good trip. We will call you later." Chloe, 16 years old, was more interested in telling me about her new romantic relationship than asking details about my travel plans. Neither of them asked when I would return why I was traveling alone or if I needed help with anything. To them, I was the grandmother who had always been available when they needed her, and apparently they assumed I would always be available when they returned from their busy teenage lives. They had no way of knowing they were talking to me for the last time, as the grandmother who lived 20 minutes from their house, always ready to watch them when their parents had social commitments. That realization confirmed I was making the right decision. My grandchildren loved me in a superficial way as a pleasant family convenience, but they had not developed a deep emotional connection with me. That was not their fault. They were products of the environment Ashley and Michael had created, where family relationships were based on practical utility rather than genuine affection. But neither was it my responsibility to keep sacrificing my well-being to maintain unilateral relationships that did not nourish me emotionally. Tuesday morning, I signed the final deed of the house at the notary downtown. In the afternoon, while Ashley was at work, I packed my last personal belongings in the 2 suitcases I would take with me on the bus trip. I left a handwritten letter on the kitchen table. Not a desperate explanation asking for understanding, but a simple and direct statement. Ashley, I sold our old house. The money from the sale is completely mine, just like my nursing pension and all my personal savings. You all always made me feel I was a dead weight in your lives, so I decided to definitely remove that annoying burden from your shoulders. Do not try to look for me anywhere. Dorothy Henderson. I locked the front door for the last time and put the key in the mailbox exactly as I had agreed with the new owners. While waiting for the taxi that would take me to the bus terminal, I looked one last time at the house where I had lived most of my adult life. I felt neither nostalgia nor regret, only a strange sensation of completing a chapter that had lasted too long. The 8-hour trip to the coastal city gave me time to fully process the magnitude of what I had done. It was not just a geographic move, it was a total reinvention of my identity. For the first time in 72 years, I was not the obedient daughter who sacrificed her dreams for family expectations, the dedicated wife who put her husband's needs before her own, or the selfless mother who tolerated any behavior from her daughter for fear of losing contact with her. I was simply Dorothy Henderson, an older woman with enough financial resources to live independently with decades of professional experience as a nurse, with the freedom to make decisions based solely on her own well-being and happiness. Dorothy was an identity I had never explored, and the prospect was both terrifying and exciting. During the trip, I reflected on all the things I had wanted to do over the years, but had postponed for family responsibilities. I had wanted to learn to paint landscapes, take dance classes, travel to historic places, read romance novels without feeling guilty for wasting time, write letters to newspapers about issues that mattered to me, do volunteer work in organizations, helping older people in situations similar to mine. All those desires had been sleeping inside me for decades, waiting for the right moment that never arrived. There was always something more urgent. Ashley's needs when she was a child, Frank's projects, when he was alive, family crises that required my attention and resources. But now, finally, the moment had arrived. Not because external circumstances had changed, but because I had decided to change my response to those circumstances. When the bus arrived at the coastal station at sunset, Ellen was waiting for me with a colorful bouquet of tropical flowers and a smile I had not seen in years. "Welcome to your new life of freedom, Dorothy." The rented apartment was small but extremely cozy, with a direct view of the blue ocean and a terrace where I could drink coffee every morning, listening to the song of the seagulls. For the first time in whole decades, my daily schedule depended solely on my personal will. Did I want to read a romance book? I read it. Did I want to sleep in late? I slept. Did I want to eat ice cream for lunch? I ate it without any guilt. That first night in my new house, while listening to the relaxing sound of waves breaking on the beach, I realized something profound. Happiness does not require the approval of others, not even family. Peace does not depend on maintaining relationships that drain you emotionally. And self-love is not selfishness. It is the necessary foundation for any other healthy form of love. I had spent 7 decades learning to love others, sacrificing my own happiness. Now finally, the time had come to learn to love myself enough to demand respect, establish limits, and live according to my own values instead of the expectations of people who had shown they did not value my presence in their lives. Wednesday afternoon, Ashley arrived at what had been my house for one of her sporadic visits. According to what Ellen told me later, who stayed in touch with neighbors from my old neighborhood, my daughter found the house completely empty and a young couple unpacking their belongings in what had been my living room. "Where is Dorothy Henderson?" Ashley screamed with desperation. The new owners, bewildered, handed her the letter I had left on the kitchen table. Ellen told me Ashley collapsed on the stairs of the front garden crying while reading my note over and over again as if she could not process the words. During the next 3 weeks, my cell phone rang incessantly. Ashley, Michael, Robert, Chloe, everyone calling with increasingly desperate messages. At first, the recordings were furious and accusatory. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You cannot simply disappear." Later, they became pleading. "Please tell us where you are. We are very worried." But I had learned the difference between genuine worry and panic over losing a financial convenience. After a month, I permanently blocked all family numbers on my cell phone. If they really wanted to find me, they could hire a private investigator, but I had taken all necessary legal precautions to keep my new address confidential. Finally, I had chosen my own peace over the emotional comfort of people who had never valued my presence when they had it available for free. 6 full months have passed since I left my old life of sacrifices behind. I wake up every day with the relaxing sound of the sea hitting the beach and fall asleep in absolute peace without worrying that someone is going to show up needing something from me. Ellen and I have become inseparable adventure companions. We take energizing morning walks on the beach. We religiously attend a reading circle at the municipal library and even started watercolor painting classes at a local art school. I discovered with surprise that I have a natural gift for art, especially for painting colorful seascapes. My small terrace became a makeshift studio full of canvases, and kind neighbors always sincerely praise my paintings when they pass by the street. I never imagined that at 72 years of age I would discover an artistic talent I did not even know existed inside me. Sometimes, when I am affectionately watering the plants on the terrace or preparing my favorite afternoon tea, I remember the submissive woman I was in my previous life, always running after others, always available to solve other people's problems, always put in the background by my own family. That sacrificed woman seems to have lived in a completely different dimension. Now I am Dorothy Henderson, the retired painter who lives facing the ocean, who has true friends who respect me, and who will never again be anyone's doormat in this world. I received a letter from Ashley exactly a month ago, addressed to my old address, but forwarded by the new inhabitants of the house. I did not open the envelope, not even out of curiosity. I put it directly in the trash, along with 3 other letters that arrived in the following weeks. The painful past no longer belongs to me. Yesterday afternoon, I was painting an orange sunset when a young mother walked by the beach, carrying a crying child in her arms and dragging another by the hand with visible exhaustion. For a brief moment, I remembered little Ashley, the happy afternoons we spent together at the park in our old neighborhood. I felt a quick pang of nostalgia for the past, but absolutely no regret for the decision taken. Some family bridges are burned out of pure need for emotional survival, not out of petty revenge. I finished my painting with satisfaction, carefully washed the dirty brushes, and prepared my simple and delicious dinner. I sat on the terrace to eat in silence, contemplating the mesmerizing movement of the sea waves. And for the first time in decades of life, I felt completely at home and at peace with myself. The daily routine I have developed in these 6 months fills me with a satisfaction I had not experienced in years. I get up when my body naturally wakes up without alarms or schedules imposed by the needs of others. I drink my coffee on the terrace while watching the fishermen prepare their nets for the day, listening to the musical dialogue between the seagulls and the waves. There is no rush. There is no agenda other than mine. There are no interruptions from calls asking for favors or services. After coffee, Ellen and I meet on the boardwalk for our morning walk. We have developed a friendship based on mutual respect and shared interests, not on need or convenience. We talk about books we are reading, painting techniques. We want to experiment with places in this coastal region we have not yet explored. Ellen tells me about her life as a retired teacher, her own experiences with adult children who take her for granted, her discoveries about the freedom of living for oneself after decades of living for others. You know what is most liberating about all this, Dorothy? Ellen told me last week while we were painting together on the beach, it is realizing that happiness does not depend on others needing us. For years, I thought my value as a mother was measured because my children required my help so much. Now I understand that true love includes teaching children to fend for themselves and to treat us with respect. Her words resonated deeply in me because they expressed exactly what I had been feeling but had not known how to articulate. The afternoons I dedicate to exploring my artistic side that had been asleep for so many decades. My painting teacher, Master Arthur, a 60-year-old man who moved here after retiring as an architect in the city, has taught me that art is a form of active meditation. When you paint a landscape, Dorothy, he explained during one of our classes, you are not just capturing what you see, you are processing what you feel, releasing emotions you might not even know you had stored. He was right. My first paintings were faithful representations of the beach and ocean, technically correct, but emotionally neutral. But as I developed confidence with brushes and colors, more expressive elements began to appear in my works clouds that seemed to carry the weight of years of sacrifice waves that crashed against rocks with the force of released frustrations, sunsets that shone with the hope of new beginnings. Master Arthur suggested I participate in a small exhibition organized by the art school every quarter for older adult students. At first I resisted. The idea of strangers seeing and judging my paintings seemed terrifying to me, but Ellen convinced me, Dorothy, you no longer have to hide or minimize your talents to make others feel comfortable. Your paintings are beautiful and deserve to be seen. The exhibition took place last month at the City Cultural Center. I exhibited 5 paintings, 3 seascapes, a portrait of Ellen reading in her garden, and an abstract composition I titled Liberation, an explosion of warm colors emerging from a dark gray background. To my surprise, several people approached during the opening to congratulate me and ask about my technique. An older lady, Mrs. Carolyn, told me something that moved me to tears. Your paintings convey a serenity that can only come from someone who has found inner peace after much suffering. I sold 3 of the 5 paintings that night. It was not a significant sum of money, but the fact that strangers had valued my art enough to buy it and take it to their homes filled me with a pride I had not felt in decades. It was a different pride from what I had experienced as a mother or wife. It was not pride for the achievements of others I had supported, but pride for something I had created completely by myself. That night after the exhibition, Ellen and I went to dinner at a small restaurant facing the sea. "Let us toast," said Ellen, raising her glass of red wine, "to the women who finally learned to value ourselves." As we clinked our glasses, I realized I was celebrating not just the sale of my paintings, but my complete rebirth as an independent and creative person. Weekends are dedicated to exploring the coastal region. I have visited traditional fishing villages where families still live according to values of genuine intergenerational respect. I've walked through local markets where vendors treat me like a complete person, not like a convenience or a problem to solve. I have participated in cultural festivals where my age is seen as a symbol of wisdom and experience, not as a synonym for obsolescence. In one of these festivals, I met Mrs. Rose, an 85-year-old woman who lives alone for 20 years after her adult children treated her like a burden. My daughter told me while we shared corn, "Prepared what you did is not selfishness, it is self-love. And self-love is the basis of all true love. If we do not love ourselves enough to demand respect, how are we going to teach others to love us correctly?" Mrs. Rose told me that after moving alone to this coastal town, her children initially reacted with anger and accusations. But after several years of distance, one of them, the youngest, approached to ask for forgiveness and to try to build a relationship based on mutual respect. Not all my children learned the lesson, she explained, but one did. And that renewed relationship with Reuben is worth more than all the superficial relationships I had before with the 4 of them. Her story made me reflect on the possibility that someday Robert or Chloe, my grandchildren, might look for me with a more mature perspective on family relationships. But it also confirmed to me that my well-being cannot depend on that possibility. I have learned to build a full and independent life that does not require the validation or presence of family members who do not value me. The nights here are especially magical. After dinner, I sit on my terrace with a cup of chamomile tea and watch the stars reflecting in the dark water of the ocean. There are no traffic noises. There is no television with depressing news. There is no phone ringing with family crises to solve. Just the constant murmur of the waves and the occasional song of some nightbird. In these moments of absolute silence, I fully process the transformation I have experienced. It is not that I have stopped being a mother or grandmother. Those roles are an integral part of my personal history, but I have stopped defining myself exclusively through those relationships. I have rediscovered Dorothy Henderson as a complete individual with her own interests, unique talents, and the fundamental right to be treated with dignity and respect. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Frank were alive during this crisis with Ashley. Would he have made the radical decision to move alone, or would he have continued tolerating the mistreatment for not wanting to separate Frank from his daughter? It is impossible to know, but I suspect that Frank, with his practical wisdom and genuine love for me, would have supported any decision that protected my emotional well-being. Dorothy told me once during his last months of life, when it was already evident that Ashley had fundamentally changed, "Promise me that if you ever have to choose between your dignity and maintaining family peace, you are going to choose your dignity, because a person who does not respect herself cannot really love others in a healthy way. In that moment, his words seemed excessively dramatic to me. Now I understand they were prophetically necessary. Last week, I received an unexpected call on my landline, the only number I kept active for medical emergencies. It was Mrs. Gwen, my old neighbor from Detroit, calling to tell me that Ashley had appeared at her door, asking if she knew anything about my whereabouts. According to Mrs. Gwen, my daughter looked haggard and nervous, very different from the confident and prosperous woman she had been. She looked desperate, Dorothy, Mrs. Gwen told me. She asked me if I thought you were okay, if I believed you could be in danger. I told her I knew nothing, but knowing your character, you were probably perfectly fine and had simply decided to live your life in private. When Mrs. Gwen asked me if I wanted to give any message to Ashley if she appeared again, I replied, "Tell her that her mother is alive, is fine, and is living the life she chose to live." That was all the communication I am willing to maintain with my previous life. I do not feel cruelty toward Ashley. In fact, I sincerely hope this experience teaches her to value the relationships she has before it is too late with other important people in her life. But my role as her life teacher is over. Now she is an adult woman who has to face the consequences of her decisions, just like any other person in the world. Last night, while finishing a new painting, a night landscape of the beach under the full moon, I reflected on what forgiveness really means. For years, I thought forgiving meant forgetting, excusing and continuing relationships as if nothing had happened. Now I understand that true forgiveness sometimes requires permanent distance. I have forgiven Ashley for not knowing how to value my love and sacrifice, but that forgiveness does not force me to keep exposing myself to her lack of respect. I have forgiven Michael for reinforcing classist attitudes that alienated my daughter from her humble roots, but that forgiveness does not require me to pretend we are a united family. I have forgiven Robert and Chloe for inheriting behavioral patterns that see grandparents as conveniences instead of people worthy of love, but that forgiveness does not mean I have to be available to be used by them when it is convenient for them. Forgiveness, I have learned, is primarily for my own peace of mind. It is the decision not to carry resentment that would poison my soul, but it is not an invitation to tolerate continuous mistreatment or sacrifice my well-being for the emotional comfort of people who have shown they do not value me. This morning, Ellen and I went to the municipal market to buy fresh ingredients for lunch. While selecting ripe tomatoes and perfect peppers, the vendor, Mrs. Ashley Irony of Fate, commented to me, "Mrs. Henderson, you always look so calm and happy. What is your secret?" I smiled at her while paying for my vegetables, learning to love myself enough not to accept being treated badly, even if it is by family. Mrs. Ashley nodded wisely. "Oh, how right you are. I also had to learn that lesson with my own children. At first they got angry when I stopped being their free domestic employee, but then they learned to treat me like the mother I am, not like the servant they thought they had the right to have." These casual conversations with women who have lived similar experiences confirm to me that my situation is not unique. There's a silent epidemic of older mothers who are taken for granted, used and emotionally abused by adult children who never learned reciprocity in family relationships. But there are also inspiring examples of women who found the courage to break those patterns and reclaim their dignity. This afternoon, while I paint on my terrace with the sound of the ocean as a soundtrack, I feel complete in a way I had never experienced. It is not the completeness that comes from being needed by others, but the one that comes from being at peace with oneself. It is not the satisfaction of having sacrificed everything for family, but that of having finally learned to value my own happiness as something legitimate and important. At 72, finally I understand that the most important love we can cultivate is healthy self-love. Not the selfishness that ignores the needs of others, but the basic respect toward oneself that establishes appropriate limits and demands reciprocity in relationships. This self-love is the foundation that makes it possible to love others in a genuine and sustainable way. Tomorrow, Ellen and I are going to explore a fishing village that is an hour from here by bus. We are going to bring our painting materials and spend the day capturing the beauty of a new place. Then we are going to eat fresh seafood at a local restaurant and talk about the books we are reading in our reading circle. They are simple plans, but they are made with the freedom of one who can choose how to spend her time without having to justify herself to anyone. They are plans that nourish my soul instead of draining my energy. They are plans that remind me that life can be beautiful when we finally learn to live it for ourselves. While I write these words at sunset with the sky painting itself in colors I will soon try to capture on a canvas, I feel a deep gratitude for having found the courage to change my life when it seemed too late to start over. It was not easy to break decades-long patterns, leave behind the safety of the known, or face family disapproval. But it was necessary for my emotional survival and my dignity as a human being. Sometimes the greatest rebirth possible is the silence one chooses to keep to protect her peace. We are curious to know how far this story reached. Where are you watching us from? Comment below.